Dear Helg, in my last letter I explained that Vernier had quarantined our group in the library after a magical melody that set us all to humming. She was convinced that this seemingly harmless symptom would ultimately result in a macabre end for us all. We searched through the ledger in the bindery and discovered that one text, Shem Sham's Nursery Rhymes, had been submitted for a spawn repair and was now missing. As none of the other texts listed in the ledger were missing or exuded an ominous, cursory miasma, we assumed it to be the culprit. I spoke to Ebner's girl, Galby, as that seemed like the logical place to start in the case of a missing children's book. I could tell right off that she was hiding something and enlisting Sebastian's help. I assumed that a circus folk, and one close to Galby's size, would be more disarming than myself. He was making some progress, and discovered that Locke also knew something about the missing text, but then things started getting even stranger. First, Ebnar began to scream and seize up, before eventually collapsing into an incoherent mess. He said he'd seen it, but we could get no more out of him, and I took the old curmudgeon downstairs so that he could rest. While I was away, Scorpio and Sebastian were overcome by a strong urge to strike Turnin, but were able to overcome this compulsion before doing him any real damage. No sooner had that issue been resolved than shadows, and I mean capital S, shadows, like the ones in the temple where Cleek met his end, materialized and attacked us all where we stood. After dispatching our phantom assailants, we regrouped to discuss the recent eerie developments. As we did, we heard a deep and melodic singing from upstairs. The words were set to the tune we'd all been unconsciously humming. See a mother scything wheat, forgotten husband sleeping near. With one swing she took his feet, with another took his ear. Does the shadow have a name? Shem Shime. Causes grief, avoids the blame. Shem Shime. It went on like that for 2 more verses, each subsequent one just as disturbing in nature, before looping back to the start. We went to investigate and left Locke in the Firefly room with Galby, giving him strict instructions to watch after her. After some rooting around in an old storage room, we found a cryptic message to finish the rhyme scratched into the floor, and 2 skeletal bodies hidden beneath a loose floor stone. One of the skulls was the source of the singing, and all of a sudden we were all speaking in a sing-song voice. As we were puzzling over our next move, we heard a commotion from the main section of the library. The tabaxi, Bird and the sour-faced one, had stood for about all that they could, and were trying to breach quarantine against Vernier's most urgent objections. Bird turned on Vernier and began to claw at her. Sebastian was quick thinking and cast a spell to root everyone in place, and I was able to subdue our would-be escapees. It was then that Sebastian took leave of his senses in earnest. He began running, and then flying all over the place. He insisted some kind of boogeyman was after him. He managed to calm down eventually, but this was only a sign of things to come. We decided that we'd had enough, and that it was time to take the kids' gloves off and find out what Galby and Locke knew about Shem Sham's Nursery Rhymes. On the way to the lower floor, I felt a strange, violent urge, but was able to suppress it. Unfortunately, Sebastian, Scorpio, and Hen became enthralled by whatever demonic forces were at work, and began to sing the nursery rhyme at the top of their lungs before attacking the rest of us. I managed to hold Sebastian down until he regained his senses, and Turnin was able to use that wand of his, blast Scorpio and Hen's wits back into their skulls. As we dusted ourselves off, Galby appeared at the top of the stairs, covered in blood, with a clockwork book in her hands. I was relieved that none of the blood turned out to be hers. She had been the target of the same malignant rage as the rest of us, and had struck Locke over the head with the heavy text, just as they had agreed that they should bring it to us. The book depicted the scenes described in the song we'd all been ensorcelled by, in a series of mechanical pop-up scenes. The final panel was inoperable, and we took it straight away to the bindery to fix it and learn the final verse. Terranin seemed to have the knack for repairing it, but he suddenly panicked. He claimed the room was filling with water and raised his hands to his throat in a pantomime of drowning. I was able to take over and, with the aid of Sebastian's nimble hands, we were able to repair the book's spine. The last panel showed how Semshime was ultimately vanquished by a young girl dropping a millstone on him. As the final rhyme came to an end, shadows exploded from the book and materialized as Semshime himself. He was a terrifying force, and after a brief scrape I found myself lying on the ground, Hen pouring a healing potion into my mouth after having taken a wicked lump to the head. Terranin had lured Semshime out into the library proper by carrying away the book that had contained him. I was able to get up and shove the mass of shadows in front of a bookcase, and Scorpio, always fast on the uptake, shoved the massive shelf over. It crushed Semshime and broke the book's curse. We had a brief talk with Galby and Locke about sticky fingers, but didn't have much left in us, and soon retired to our beds. In the morning, we went to speak to Abbot Friffle before leaving the library. We reported the murder of Matrius and the strange happenings that followed in the library. He thanked us for our service and asked us if we could do him one last favor before departing. It seems that supplies have been going missing from the monastery's larders without explanation. Considering ourselves something of experts after our supply woes while aboard the Loyal Tide, we happily did some sleuthing. We uncovered a false wall in a pantry that descended into the underbelly of the abbey. Underneath, we discovered several ghouls, unlike the variety I ran into earlier in our adventures. These ones seemed more of a mind to talk. They asked us if the cataclysm was over, and described some kind of bright burning light that had driven their civilization underground. They also asked if we still served Terran, and referred to us, presumably any non-ghoul, as slaves. They were surprised that us surface dwellers have managed to create a civilization in the time that they've been sequestered. They mentioned Cytherial, an evergreen city, and a project called the Stairway that his lot had been working on. Finally, they claimed that we, those of us who arrived from the mainland, had originally hailed from Sennar and departed long ago after our god had directed us to sail out west. Yours, Belle.